Here's the clickbaity teaser clip to make sure that you stick around and watch the whole video. Hi, in this video I'm building an extending leaf farm table. I've seen a few other videos on YouTube of other woodworkers building similar extending leaf tables. I wanted to share my design in which I incorporated a steel frame with steel rods for the extension hardware. I hope you enjoy it. These marks are for lining up where the biscuits are going to be to align the tabletop. Whenever I glue up a tabletop, I actually use a bolt and drag it across it to spread out the glue more evenly. Whenever I glue up tabletops, I put blue painter's tape on the clamps to prevent the glue from squeezing out and damaging and ruining the clamps. This is me wiping down the glue squeeze out with just a little bit of water. This is a lot easier than cleaning up after it's dried. I'm gluing a piece of wood on the edges of the tabletop to give the appearance that the tabletop is extra thick. The extra thickness also helps in hiding the expanding leaf mechanism. Every woodworker knows they can never have enough clamps. This is where we cut down the metal stock for the frame of the expanding leaf. I'm attaching the two pieces of metal together so when I mill them down they are going to be exactly the same length. When they get clamped in the vise, they'll be milled down to the same length, so I'll spin it around and mill both sides. The four pieces are the center of the hardware mechanism where the steel rods will slide on. All four pieces are milled up, and now we have to drill on the ends of it so we can attach it to the main frame. And here you can see that I'm drilling, and I'm going to tap the holes so they can all be bolted together. That silver piece is actually a piece of aluminum that I made to drill perfectly straight in the end of the table frame. I'm using a drill to help speed up tapping the center pieces because there were a lot of holes to tap. These pieces of aluminum are made to hold the bearings for the rails. Here I'm pressing in the bearings for the sliding mechanism. These are the tabs that will actually hold the metal frame to the wooden table. This is the first time I've ever actually welded anything like this, so it doesn't look the cleanest, but a little grinding helped it. Here I'm machining the initial clips that I used to hold the table extension together, but as you'll see, they didn't end up working out. Here's the full table frame being assembled. As you can see, these pieces of aluminum I am attaching, you will see that they are holding the linear rods that will actually allow the table to slide in and out. The customer wanted the table to be 5 feet long without the leaves, the extension leaves in, and 7 feet long with the extension leaves in, and here you can see the full length of the table. Here's a little trick that I use where I cut the breadboard end and the tabletop right next to each other on the same cut, so when the breadboard end presses against the tabletop, it'll have a matching edge. Here's the base frame where it's made out of pine, and I'm cutting down the stock for it. In these clips, I'm prepping the wood for the base. Put a nice round over edge just to break the edge so it's not sharp when people run their hands over the piece of wood. Here's my fancy clamp holding the frame together so I can actually mortise it out, so when I glue it up I use floating tenons, and as you can see here I'm using a tool to cut out for the floating tenons. I actually forgot to get a good video of the table setup prior to it being completely finished, so we had to use a cell phone Snapchat video inserted here. Here's a shot where it's showing how the current latch design was working. This is how the table was meant to be designed and how you would install the breadboard end. But as you can see, it's not strong enough. When I was designing it, I planned on using thicker rods, but didn't order the right thickness, so I had to order new ones and change the design to be able to handle how heavy the breadboard ends are. Since we were upgrading the table to larger diameter rods, I had to completely disassemble the table and machine the holes larger to handle the larger rods. I was actually lucky because I could just reuse the same pieces, just make the holes bigger. Since we upgraded from the 3 rods to the 2 rods, the rods are now thicker, but because there are only 2 rods there, now it's unstable, so it wobbles back and forth. So I actually designed these special spacers that will go underneath and stabilize it. It actually bugs me that I use different screws in the 2 different pieces. Now it doesn't wobble. The style of the table is a rustic farmhouse style, and there are knots that are all the way through the table, so I had to pour epoxy to fill the knots, and it still gives it the rustic look. So we made these latches and they didn't end up working out. They ended up being too loose. So we are going to start using a new latch mechanism that I was able to determine will work out. And they'll be a lot tighter and actually be able to pull the table together. I spent way too long designing this latch mechanism. for an off-the-shelf part that'll just make it better. The new butterfly latches are slightly too thick, so I've made a recessed pocket that I'll have to actually, this is a test piece, and I'll actually put a recessed pocket in the table so it won't be as noticeable. Since this is a rustic table, we actually use a fancy V-bit router bit to give the table a much more rustic look, because it gives each individual board a round over edge. We spray a white lacquer on the base. I actually take the sander and run sandpaper over the entire base, just a little bit to give it a much more rustic look. This is a process where we spray a stain over the paint, and we call it antiquing, and it gives it a nice patinaed look. Here's the table base being glued up. Right here's a good shot of how an antiqued board looks. I actually use a really big ratchet strap to glue the table base up. I expected that to be a lot more dramatic, but it kind of just snapped together all at once. After spraying a few coats of finish on the top and the bottom of the table, we move on to assembly. I'm able to attach the table base to the tabletop with these fancy little clips that I made that allows the tabletop to expand and contract without pulling apart the table base. And here it is, the final shot of the table fully assembled in front of a white backdrop. Ooh, isn't that fancy? How many people do you know with removable leaves on their farmhouse table? And here's the completed table. If you've stuck around the entire time, thank you and have a good one.